Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Junia Doan's A Spark. I'm Junia Doan. Thank you for joining us. My guest today is novelist Joseph Amiel. Joe began his career as a movie industry lawyer who enjoyed writing in his spare time. He is now the author of 5 published novels and just completed a sci-fi novel for young adults. Welcome, Joe. Well, I understand from reading about it that you started writing early on in 4th grade class when the teacher required a weekly story. What instructions do you remember him giving you all?
Well, it was a she, and Miss Plimpton, I remember her very well, lovely woman who got really unhappy after a while. I kept putting in a new chapter of my book. And it kept mounting up, and she kept saying, try writing about something else. And I said, but I haven't gotten to the end yet. That became the beginning, and I wrote poetry as I went through, and I wrote stories. And I think that for writers, that's a compulsion, and it starts pretty young. There are writers who discover their voice when they're older. But most writers, I think, know they're writers, whether they do it professionally later on or not. They want to write. They have things that they want to get out. There's stories they want to tell, and that's how I started.
Is it like a buildup of pressure?
It's something you just have to do. It's like people saying, boy, I love to jog. I can't start my day without getting out there. It's almost the same thing.
Interesting. Do you think you're an observer?
I think so, but mainly I think I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories. I love the oppositions. I love the conflicts. I love the ending. I love where it ends up going. And any good story ends up at a different place from where it starts. And that's what keeps the reader engaged. Where is it going to go? Why does this person want to do something so badly that he's, or she, is going through all these trials, these ordeals? What is that urge? And that's what keeps a reader reading a book. And it's your job as a writer, not only to make it interesting, but to create a moral universe in which this occurs.
How do you create that sense of engagement with the word?
I think it's more than just creating pretty words. I remember one friend once saying to me, I have a novel in me that I want to write. I just can't think of that first line. And I said, start with the second line.
Right.
You know, you're going to change them anyway. Rewriting is the art of the novel. Jack Kerouac, for example, wrote the whole thing on a long piece of paper that he just kept typing. And Truman Capote said, that's not writing, that's typing.
Right.
I'm a rewriter. I think most writers are rewriters. Some of them get a better first draft than others. But you're constantly rebuilding, constantly changing, constantly trying to understand what it is that your protagonists are involved in. And have you created a story that people say, I want to keep going. I want to know what happens. I care about these people.
You know, I read that sometimes writers sort of outline everything and they have so much and they know exactly what's happening. And some say the characters write themselves, or the characters, I wanted them to go right, they characters. What is your experience?
I try to create enough of an outline so I know where I'm going. Characters do create their own lives, but they can also run away with your book. And there you are 100 pages later and you say, what happened? Where were they going? This is not where I wanted my story to go. This is not where this character should be. This may be where the character took off for, but let's circle back. And I think it is important because I think a novel, any story, screenplay, whatever it is, a story I tell you, for example, over cocktails maybe, it's got a structure. It's a story where somebody's up against something and there's an ending to it. And there are heroes, there are villains, not necessarily as bald as that, as stereotypical as that, but there are people you want to understand, and that's the heart of any story.
Do you think that people's attention span is shorter now? Have you changed?
Oh, absolutely. 140 characters along with me? Yeah, I think it is. I think not only their attention spans, their vocabulary, LOL,
yeah,
IMO. I mean, we can't even get fast enough to, we've got to put it into initials. I think it is, and I think television has done that to a certain extent. If a television show drags, we get unhappy. Oh my God, you know, this is so slow. I think that's very true, and I think we stuff more things into our experience today than ever before. I mean, one day can be the equivalent of a week or two of somebody who lived 100, 200 years ago. The experiences, the effects of the world around you.
Has that influenced how you write?
I think it's influenced how everybody writes. I think, and movies have too. The fact that movies could cut from an opening to a next shot, to a different shot, I think that has really invigorated writing to the extent that we have a different kind of novel in many ways, particularly the commercial novel. I think the literary novel as well, but I think that particularly the commercial novel, in that people expect something. They expect action. They expect something to happen. It's not merely exploring the daisies around the old homestead, but they expect a story. And the story has to engage them, and has to engage them early and well. And I think that's been a very good thing, at least for me as a storyteller. That's what I wanted to do. Much more than the pure exploration of emotion, character, etc., without story. Story, character, and emotion, and so forth, has to emerge from story. Has to emerge from
interesting
this where this character is going. Otherwise, it's a character study, not a story.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Why do stories engage people?
I think there are a couple of reasons. One, because you identify with that person. You identify with that person's, not just journey, but with their desire. If you think about it, every major character in a story has a desire. Whether it's Romeo for Juliet, or Hamlet to revenge his father, who was killed by his mother's new husband, everybody has a desire, and it's that desire, and you want to see where it takes them. You're on that journey with them to satisfy that desire, whether it's for love, for revenge, to learn something, to do something, and you want to see how it works out. One of the reasons that the mystery story, the mystery novel is so popular,
right,
is because we want to see who done it. And we want to see that detective, or whoever that poor schnook is, who happened to get wrapped up in this crime or whatever it is. How are they going to get through it? Are they going to discover it? How two guys have their guns pointed on them. How is he going to get out of that room? We care about that guy, and we care about what happens, and we don't want to give up that book until we know who done it.
In my own life, I've really puzzled, why am I so curious?
Yeah.
Which is my charm, sometimes, but curious about a lot of things. But also, in a larger sense, why are we curious about other people's stories? Do we seek to learn? Do we seek to be distracted? It comes from compassion and care? What would you guess at this point?
It really is a guess, because I'm like you, Junia. I'm somebody who was born curious,
right,
and wanted very, very much to know what was on the next page, or what was behind that door, or you know, I'm a writer, a lawyer by training. Always thought of myself as a writer, but every week I'll read the science section of the New York Times. I'll pore through it. What's new? What's happening? What has been discovered? And I think part of that curiosity translates itself into being a writer, into wanting to tell that story and find out what happens. But I think curiosity is inbuilt. I know people who have absolutely no curiosity and have never had it from the time they were born. Life goes by and they accept it. They don't care what's on the other side of the door.
Interesting. Now, when you were practicing law,
yes,
and what are the similarities between writing for law and writing a novel?
Well, my law school professor told me how well I wrote, but I wasn't writing a novel. You know, I just knew how to put sentences together, and you know, well, that was my training in English and so forth. I was an English major at college and so forth. But so that was helpful, because a lot of people don't know how to write well, and that's sad, because you can learn very, very early how to write well, and it's very helpful in life. Apart from that, the only thing it does, I think, is, if I may make it simplistic, is you tell a story. When you're writing, not so much a contract, which I wrote too many of, not so much a contract, but when you're making an argument, you can make that argument so much better if you have a sense of story. What is it that's going to grab that person? And an opening line, a way of coming in at an angle this person didn't expect, coming up with facts that person is going to be surprised by and convinced by. I think that's when it's helpful.
Interesting. And how are they dissimilar?
They're dissimilar in that very often they are boilerplate or the equivalent.
Yeah.
There are certain things you need in a contract. A is buying B's automobile for X number of dollars. That's the consideration. You have to have all of those factors in a contract, or else it's not a true contract. Well, you learn that in law school. But what you don't learn is how to be a lawyer, unfortunately.
Yes, I hear that.
Maybe now they teach that, but what you learn is the law and not how to be a lawyer, and I think that's really important.
I always imagine a writer spends a lot of time alone because they're working.
It's a joy.
It's a joy.
It's a joy. I spent one of my books, Birthright, which was an international bestseller, and people have told me they really love. And I've had people come up to me many years later, tell me how much they like. But Birthright is a story of a woman who is adopted into a family like the Rothschilds. And it starts from the time she's 5 years old and goes through her adult and her building her own bank, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I loved every minute I was with that woman. She was my own creation, but she had a life of her own. Once I gave her certain qualities, certain characteristics, certain talents, at that point, she became real. And my head is populated with all of the people. What are they going to do? Should they be going through that door? Should they be walking this direction? Should they be picking this up? Now, he wouldn't do that. He would do such and such. And in a sense, they aren't truly talking to you. But they are in the sense that they're saying, I should be going there. That's an interesting way for me to talk to that guy, or to, I don't know, meet the alien from the spaceship, or whatever it is you've posited. They're always in your head.
I just love that. It's the opposite of lonely. You know, it's a heightened sense of, it's like virtual reality, you know, but in your head.
So true. And I'm a very visual person. So for me, I see them. I mean, I don't see them like as clearly as I'm seeing you, but I can see them when they walk across the room, when they're in a ship. I can see the ship. I can see them talking to the captain. That's not only helpful, it's companionship.
Yes, I see that now. Yeah. In 4th grade, was that happening?
I think so, but in 4th grade, it's partly that you're the hero. You're the hero of your story. And although he's got a different name,
right.
that's his subterfuge.
What are the joys in writing for you?
I think the joys are in making it come out right, in doing it well, and finally telling the story. I've had people, I've had people tell me, oh, when such and such happens in that book, I was really, and I couldn't remember it a little bit because the pleasure for me was in the creation. And once it's over, you move on.
Yes.
And the book becomes something that's almost not part of you anymore. Oh, I remember the guy who wrote that. I remember reading that. And recently, within the last few years, I reread all my books because I put them all online on Amazon. You can get them in either print or Kindle. But I re-edited them, in a sense, and polished a couple of things. Years later, I'm a better writer, I think. Who knows? But I reread them. And there were times I said, oh, that guy really wrote that nicely. I like what he... And it took a while for me to resubmerge myself in the fact that that was me. And I've got to take this book and make it as good as it can get on my second look at it. Because
you're a different person?
Partly because I'm a different person, but also partly because it was complete. It was out of my head. And now I'm diving back in.
Yes.
I'm diving back in and trying to swim around and meet all the mermaids and the fishes and all of that in this strange world that I hadn't been in a while.
But now you're turning to sci-fi for young adults. What occasioned that redirection?
Yes, well, I've just written a new book, and the book is it started, the same way most of my books start. What if? What if such and such happened, and so forth. And this is a book I'm very happy with because it's the first of a series. And I won't go into it, but my next step is my longtime agent died. And I've never had to look for an agent. And now I'm in the process of I'm in the market,
right.
in effect, for an agent, for an association who can then go out to the publishers with the book. But for me, this book, do you really want to know how it happened?
Absolutely.
2 things happened. The first thing is I read the first Harry Potter book. Oh. I have read all the Harry Potter books. And I loved it. And within 2 minutes, I was 12 years old again. And I was in that adventure that I loved as a kid. A new world. All kinds of interesting things were happening that took me away. The second thing that happened is I began thinking, what if in a parallel universe there was a world like the Earth, but different, but a world that is almost 200 years behind for some reason, and yet much more advanced secretly, that the rulers are trying to keep it almost like it was in 1776. And there's an American Revolution going on, but everything is in effect juggled and topsy-turvy and interesting, and you meet all of the same kinds of characters, the Ben Franklin, John Adams, but other things have been happening. It is not the same world. It is a world that our heroes who have fallen into this this new world, have got to traverse and find it's very dangerous. It's dangerous partly because they were exiled from here. They came back, and there are people who don't want them to survive. And
so they're going back in time?
They're going back into a version of time, that they find that becomes very dangerous. You have a king, very much like King George,
right?
During the Revolution, slightly mad, but dangerous. And it is a world that they must learn to traverse, and that they must grow. They are just 18, and these two, a young man and a young woman, a girl and a boy and a girl, have got to learn to get along in a world that looks so similar, but is very different and is very threatening and menacing, and they must grow. And growth is one of the things that I think is important in a novel. It can't end up at the same place where you begin. Your characters have to, if not grow, at least have to change, have to meet the challenges that the book presents. In my case, they grow, and in the future
what
series,
taught you in life to grow?
What?
What experiences in life taught you to grow, or did you learn from?
I think other people teach you. We're living in a time now where really bad male behavior is finally being exposed, punished, as it should have been. I was very fortunate in having gone to a school very early, as you did, where the girls were really smart and assertive, and there was no way you could be a male chauvinist because they were a lot better at arithmetic than I was when learning arithmetic, that kind of thing. And you learn and you learn from them as you come out of the cloistered world of your own little family when you first get to school, how to relate to other people. And they teach you as much as your teachers teach you, as much as experience teaches you, that that there is a way to grow and behave if you want to be accepted and to be acceptable. And the sad thing is, a lot of these men who have been outed recently for their behavior never got to know that, never got to internalize any of that.
Well, they probably went to co-ed schools. I'm not going anywhere near this one because we're all about sort of what's good in life.
Right. No, I mean, I'm being serious. I'm saying that's what makes for good people. For good
Right.
people are positive associations.
I think
as
you
they grow.
choose every moment what kind of person you're going to be.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's true, and I think that one of the things about, at least in the books that I try to write,
Right.
is that what happens when a good person comes up against bad people, comes up against bad experiences? How do they deal with them? Where do they go, and how do they triumph?
It's a major life question.
That's what you write for. That's what a novelist writes for. He doesn't want small questions. He's got to have a moral universe in which his characters must survive.
And do they?
In my books, they usually do. They often do. Relationships. What happens to them? What happens after the ordeal? How has that changed the relationships of people who might have loved each other, who did love each other, who could love each other, who could be friends, who are enemies? All of that is what you live with as you read through a book.
Now, you've had a long-term marriage to someone you met at this very famous school that we
Yes.
shared together.
Yes, she was in nursery school with my sister, in the nursery class with my sister, when I was in first grade with her sister.
And what did you learn during the course of that marriage that you could share that would inspire others? Because 50% of people don't make it through.
Marry the right person. When I finally, my eyes opened up, she was 16. She was at a party being given by friends. I knew everybody. We were all at school together, and I was older. And okay, she was beautiful. She still is beautiful. But she was smart and funny and gracious. And, you know, that's a pretty potent package in a 16-year-old. Well, all these years later, she is beautiful, she is smart, she is funny, she is interesting, and I'm a very lucky guy.
And after marrying the right person, how do you go up and down through the life
Well, you've got somebody doing it with you. It's a lot easier to have somebody going through this with you. Somebody you care about who cares about you and to whom you can be vulnerable and real. And life gets a lot easier when there's somebody back home. That's the real reason why we should marry, is that there's somebody there who cares about you and who you care about.
What of the values you grew up with did you try to transmit to your children?
To be good. That being good doesn't cost you anything, and in fact, it makes the world a better place and it makes your life better. I really kind of, in a sense, pity the awful people. The awful people must continue being awful, creating an awful world for themselves, trapped in an awful world. They may think it's the right thing to do, but their lives have got to be not just strained, but desolate in a way. That good people attract other good people. They attract a good life. I'm very fortunate to have had a good life and having a good life, and just keeps getting better. I don't think that happens with people who aren't like that.
Thank you, Joe. We learned a lot right now. First of all, see life as story. See life as what if. See life as opportunity to learn. He early on identified as a writer because he felt the urge, the desire to communicate, to write it down, almost like an ability, you might say. But the ability to write well is important for all of us, whether we're in legal or we're just negotiating life. The whole idea of living a good life by marrying the right person, as he said, or raising your children to be good is such an important feature for a satisfying life, because in the end, we want a life of meaning and satisfaction, and there are always challenges, but there are always satisfactions. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you the very next time. I appreciate it, and appreciate you, Joe. That was just wonderful that you're here.
Thank you.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadonsthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadonthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.